part.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, okay. I did not know.
No, you're okay. Shari's coming in.
Okay, the
cool.
meeting is going live on YouTube right now.
Yay.
That was good work while you lasted there, Dan. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
So Shari, just for your information, council is present with the exception of Councillor Polson.
Great, thank you. I'm just trying to get my space set up here.
I do have 2 o'clock.
Okay, my clock just changed to 2. Okay, so we will call our regular meeting of council to order and start by recognizing that we are holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Shuswap and Hoopachesit First Nations. We have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from the city clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there's 3 items. If council would consider amending the agenda to include items F2A and F2B, which are written submissions received today regarding the development variance permit application number 101 for 5200 Gertrude Road, one being from Mrs. Ream and another being a letter signed by a number of tenants at the subject address. And the other item is item F6, which is a report from the city clerk regarding ministerial order number 192.
I'll move the amendments.
Thank you. Are there any late items from councillors? Seeing none, motion with the amendment is moved. Is there a seconder?
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Great. And all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Just a reminder to everyone that we do have public input available in this meeting. If anyone has questions they would like to submit or comments for public input period, you can email council@portalberni.ca. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 10 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on June 8th, 2020, as well as the special meeting held at 2 p.m. on June 15th, 2020. Would somebody like to move adoption?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. And do we have any public input for today?
Nothing received, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And we have no delegations, no unfinished business. So we'll start with staff accounts. And the first one is accounts from, or staff reports. The first one is accounts from Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated June 22, 2020 be received and checks numbering 146313 to 146382 inclusive and payments of accounts totaling $1,488,942.40 be approved.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments? All in favor? Carried. And next, we will welcome the Manager of Planning for Development Variance Permit for 5200 Gertrude Street. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you. So before you today for consideration is a development variance permit application for 5200 Gertrude Street. The applicant is seeking relief from the zoning bylaw parking regulations as they relate to multifamily developments. Specifically, the property owner has requested to vary the parking requirement from 1.25 to 1.08 parking spaces per unit for the purpose of adding an additional 8 dwelling units to this multifamily site. So the subject property is home to the Creekside apartment complex, and there are 2 existing multifamily residential buildings on site. The property is zoned RM1, low density multifamily residential, and designated as multifamily residential in the OCP. And it's also located within a development permit area number 1. So a development permit will be considered later down the road if this variance is granted. The purpose of doing the variance first is to get an indicator of whether or not this is supported before the applicant would proceed with developing the drawings and the site plans and all that kind of stuff. So they want to get a sense of whether or not this was supported before they put that in. So currently the city of Port Alberni does not have any specific policy guidelines for evaluating the merits of parking variances, but in the absence of that type of policy, we think there's some specific conditions in place that can kind of help justify a variance for the site, which include the central location of the property, the proximity and access to alternative modes of transportation, including the Dyke Walkway and public transit available on Gertrude, bike and scooter parking being provided as part of the development plan, and then access to public parking on Gertrude Street for guests and visitors. So the owner has indicated that they believe the parking lot to be underutilized. We did do some site visits at different times of the day to try to gauge a sense of whether that was true or not, and it appeared to be the case, though no specific parking analysis was provided as part of the application. But we do not really anticipate there to be any negative spillover effects to the public parking in the surrounding area. So for those reasons, the planning department had supported the proposed development variance permit. And then we brought forward the report with the recommendations to the Advisory Planning Commission back in May. And so when they reviewed it, they also indicated that they supported the reduction in parking. And then subsequent to that, we gave public notice, which was sent as required by the Local Government Act. And 2 letters that express opposition to the DVP have been received just today. So I believe they've come on the agenda as late items. And a copy of the notice for the development variance permit is also attached for your reference. So we've provided you with 3 specific options to consider today. One being to proceed with issuing the development variance permit, 2 to not proceed with issuing the development variance permit, or 3 to provide an alternative direction. And we might also suggest that council might want to consider directing staff to develop a set of policy guidelines for considering parking variances in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think actually before we go to questions from council, if possible, could the city clerk just summarize the 2 letters of correspondence that have been received?
Certainly, Madam Mayor. One from Mrs. Ream just indicates her objection to the variance. She's resided in the area for 42 years. Her property fronts onto Kitsuxis Way. The area is in the floodplain. Her concern is that there's already too densely populated with the BC housing complex and the existing Creekside apartments. She also comments about no maintenance on the lane behind the property. And comments about the increase of traffic. The second letter from a number of tenants from the property at 5200 Gertrude have expressed a number of items, but I'll highlight their 4 discussion points. One is they comment that the parking lot, in their opinion, is not underutilized. They talk about on-site visitor and guest parking is not mitigated by the public parking available on Gertrude Street. No one at the property has less of a need for a vehicle because of the amenities on Johnston, and there is not an excess parking on the site. They talk about the 8-unit multifamily dwelling on the property will restrict at least 5 tenants of the Phase 2 building from accessing their vehicles, garbage, recycling, etc. And they talk about a laundry facility as well, and that it could not possibly accommodate laundry from an additional 8 families. And that essentially summarizes their opposition.
Thank you very much. And I think before we move on to questions about the actual application, if someone would like to move receipt of items F2A and F2B so that we can have received those letters.
I will move receipt.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Did I just hear another, I think moved by Councillor Poon and seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Are there any questions on the two items of correspondence or comments? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Councillor Solda.
My window behind me looks out at that particular property. And it's interesting because I've never seen a lot of cars there. The only time I've seen the street being accessed was when like a camper motorhome type of thing was there for like 3 months during the COVID. It's no longer there. Those apartments, actually, my father-in-law built one of them, and we used to own that property years ago. And the laundry facility, yes, it is small there, but that has nothing to do with it. I think I have no problem with the development, Madam Mayor, at this moment, unless it can be changed. I don't know. I've never seen an overflow in parking problems there.
Thank you. So just on receipt of the correspondence still, if we could try to not speak to the main issue yet. Councillor Washington, did you have a comment?
Well, I'd like to comment on the main issue, please, Madam Mayor.
Sure. And Councillor Poon, you had your hand up as well for the main issue or for the correspondence?
For the main issue.
Okay, great. Then we will call the question on just receipt of the correspondence. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now if people have questions for the planner on the application, I'll start with Councillor Washington and then Councillor Poon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems to me that what the late correspondence has come in with is issues much further than the issues we have sitting in front of us today. For us to make the development for the parking to go ahead, then they can go ahead with the building plans, and at that time, that's when these letters should be there. They shouldn't be here today. It's just. I'm thinking we should forge ahead, and then we can discuss it more in depth with when it gets to the plans for the new units.
For sure. I think that's a really good point. While not commenting on the validity of some of these issues, but some of them certainly could be addressed with the development and in the development planning stage. So yes, point well taken for sure. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think that it's a very exciting time for us to be entertaining this development. And I'm also, when I look at these plans, I wonder if the parking situation could be resolved by the use of the laneway.
Possibly. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is such a strong need for rental units in our community. I would never want to jeopardize rental units for a few parking spaces. And I do believe that area of town, it is walkable to shopping and there is public transportation. So to me, I don't think would be a huge issue for the residents that would be renting these units. They can utilize other modes of transportation. I just think that there's such a strong need. We can't jeopardize any new developments for rental units at this time. So that's kind of my point that I would like to make. Thank you.
Yeah, interestingly, actually, I lived about a block away from there for a few years. And the only time in my life that my husband and I have shared one vehicle was when we lived in that area. And it was because it was everything was so accessible. So that certainly won't be the choice of everyone, but I can definitely see the rationale behind it for this situation. It certainly is possible for someone to live in that area and be able to walk to a lot of the amenities or take the bus. So it's a very central and good location. Caitlin, I'm sorry, I should have given you an opportunity. I'm not sure if you had any comments on Councillor Poon's comment about the laneway and if there's a possible way to mitigate some of the parking challenges through that, if that's something that's been explored or not.
It's not something that's been explored. I believe since the lane's currently city owned, they would have to explore purchasing that piece of property then and then consolidating it with their lot.
So it could be something that they explore if they need to. Councillor Poon.
That's not what I was referring to. I was referring to utilizing the lane in order to access their backyard for parking.
Oh, okay. That's not something that we've explored with them. It's definitely something we could talk about with them as part of the development permit process, though.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. Is the laneway, who owns the laneway? Is it the city or is it the developer?
I'm not too sure off the top of my head, to be honest. It's not something that we had looked into at this point. I would imagine that it's probably owned by the city if it's a lane.
Because I believe there's some homes in the past that behind there were complaining about that the bush needed cutting because if they tried to walk, it was just too bushy and stuff like that. And the city did clean it up. So it's something, maybe that's our responsibility, not the developers. So maybe that's something we need to look at. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And I think, again, I think these are good ideas, and this type of thing could be certainly explored during the development process for sure. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Paulson.
Am I muted? Nope.
You're good.
I'm not that familiar with this type of a project, but I am involved with an organization that has an affordable housing 11-unit apartment building, and I don't know that you can use this small scale as a formula, but we have 11 apartments there, and of the 11 of the affordable housing units there, 2 people have vehicles of the 11. So I just think that probably the parking lot is underutilized, and anytime I've driven by, it doesn't look overly busy. But just my thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, would somebody like to read the motion out, or certainly if the motion is to authorize the issuance of the development variance permit. So if that's the direction council is looking to go, somebody can move that motion, and of course have the option of making a different motion as well. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 101 to vary zoning bylaw 4832 as follows. Vary section 7.9 required amount of parking regulations from 33 parking spaces to 28 parking spaces, a variance of 5 parking spaces for the property located at 5200 Gertrude Street and legally described as Lot A, District Lot 12, Alberni District Plan 29046.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any further comments on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor. None opposed, carried. Thank you. Okay, and item 3, also from the Manager of Planning, we have the Uptown Revitalization Strategy Update, the survey results and next steps. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So Seamus and I are here today to provide you just with a quick update on the status of the Uptown District Revitalization Strategy. So over the past couple of months, we've been working with Vancouver Island University's Master Community Planning Program on that first phase of the consultation program for the strategy development. We had come to you a few months ago giving you just kind of an overview of how we were proceeding with the phases of the consultation. So phase 1 of the consultation program involved launching an online survey for 3 weeks. And the purpose of that survey was just to get a better high-level understanding of some of the needs of the area from the perspective of the community, and to identify the community's kind of priorities as they saw it relating to social and economic revitalization. So Seamus has joined us today to go over some of the survey findings. I think there he is. I can see him on the screen there.
Welcome back, Seamus.
Yeah, so I'll just hand it over to him now to go through that, and then I'll come back on at the end and talk about next steps.
Great, thank you.
Perfect, thank you, Caitlin, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Nice to see you all again. So today I just want to go over just the findings from the survey. So overall, just a very high level overview, just based on what was written in the report that was submitted. And basically, this is just a very small portion of the data we collected. We got significant amounts of responses, as we'll touch on in a moment here, and we'll do a full breakdown of data in multiple directions in the final report once it's completed. Now, from this survey, of course, we had a 15-question survey. It was live for about 3 weeks, and we got 599 responses, which, from what I understand, is one of the more responded to surveys in the Let's Connect PA program's history. And for the most part, one thing we found what was interesting was that respondents were from all over the community, from Uptown, North Port Alberni, as well as South Port Alberni. So it got a good overview of what the community was feeling, no matter where you lived in the city. Now, generally, what we found was that visitors are coming to Uptown and they're looking for shopping, restaurants, and services. And one breakdown that I had was about 51% shopping, 28% dining, and 25% personal services. So banks, doctors' offices, and the like. And a collective around 61% of respondents said that they visit the area around once a week. And we found that that was the most kind of target demographic. Though the responses when it came to that were scattered through a variety of times. So it could have been every day, it could have been once a month, but we found that the sweet spot was somewhere around once a week, once every 2 weeks.
Seamus, sorry, just if I could just pause you for a moment. I'm just wondering if the city clerk is able to share the screen so that anyone watching is able to see some of the, there's some good charts in the report that would probably be helpful when you're speaking, if we could just follow along with them. I know we're kind of back and forth between sharing the screen, not sharing the screen. So thank you so much, Twyla. Just thought it would be helpful as Seamus is going through here.
No worries. So yes, we'll just catch up there.
Great.
Yeah, right there. Perfect. So yeah,
sorry to interrupt.
No worries. But as we can see here, that chart basically kind of breaks it down to much more easier to grasp than me trying to explain it bit by bit there. But yeah, as you can see, multiple locations, but at the same time, there was sort of a majority around 2 or 3 different pieces. Now, from that, we also did ask what some of the barriers to further visits in the district were, and community members referenced multiple factors. Primarily, the concerns were around a lack of relatable businesses, issues of addiction and drug use, as well as some concern for personal safety and security. And these we found were some of the primary concerns from residents when we considering the district. And to this end, we found that crime prevention and poverty reduction were ranked as the most pressing concerns from residents. And this was very much illustrated in the essay questions, such as question number 3 here. And this sentiment was echoed in a very frequent theme through the rest of the survey results. Now, when it came to improving the district and considering some ideas, there's a series of statements asked of the of residents who were responding to the survey. And for the most part, the ideas around social issues were the most agreed upon, with around 70% of respondents agreeing that supporting people facing poverty, mental health, and addictions is an idea that they agreed with when considering the district. And 61% of respondents agreed that the social well-being should also be balanced with economic revitalization in the area. Now, when considering economic revitalization, there was a little bit of a split where we saw 45% of respondents agreeing with ideas such as business incentives to relocate to the neighborhood, with 35% disagreeing with an idea like that. So on some issues, while they were very close, there's some little splits throughout the data. Now, when prompted to ask priority tasks to undertake within the Uptown region, developing programs to address issues of crime and public safety, including improving facades and empty lots, as well as projects to reduce poverty in the district, were prioritized by respondents. And overwhelmingly, this question saw development of crime reduction as one of the highest priority, with nearly 85% of respondents marking this as the most urgent. Now, an interesting thing too we found was with the data, it demonstrated that depending where you live in the city, it had an impact on what was seen as an urgent concern on topics in some cases. Just as an example that I pulled from the data, 30% of Uptown residents saw parking as one of the more urgent tasks to undertake, while 7% from Northport Alberni saw this as an urgent task. But that being said, there are some issues such as crime prevention and poverty reduction being a constant theme no matter where you lived in the city. And for example, 63% of residents in Uptown saw poverty reduction partnerships as a priority. Folks that lived in South Port Alberni, 82%, and North Port Alberni, 75%. So some issues were very split. Other issues, there was significant consensus. Now, one interesting thing when we're looking towards the economic development side of the project, uses that respondents want to see in this district often skew towards small businesses, with some mixed residential and commercial developments also being prioritized by those who responded to the survey. And respondents also demonstrated support for some ideas such as tax breaks to help make businesses in the district a reality. And that's all I've got for my report. So if Caitlin's ready, she will fill in the rest of the blanks. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Seamus. So in terms of next steps, we are planning to launch phase 2 of the consultation program fairly soon. We have just received actually a $22,000 poverty reduction grant to support the development of the Uptown District Revitalization Strategy. So for that would kind of go more towards the social revitalization side, while staff's resources that we already have in place will focus on the economic revitalization component. That grant was given to us by the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM. And again, those funds will kind of be used towards the planning and engagement process, specifically to collaborate with local stakeholders, social service providers, vulnerable populations, and residents living in poverty to ensure that the strategy is inclusive of their needs from a planning perspective. Now, we do anticipate that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic will continue throughout the duration of this project. So we're kind of making some adjustments to what phase 2 of the engagement process might look like as we try to figure out kind of how to shift from in-person maybe to a little bit more still online or other engagement methods. But we do expect that the consultation program will kind of continue to be adapted as new information and events unfold relating to the pandemic. Any feedback that we receive throughout this process will be collected and analyzed by staff to inform those final recommendations. And we're hoping that we can bring to you a final report with those recommendations before the end of this year.
Thank you. Questions from council, starting with Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Haggard.
I think I heard in the community that there was some confusion about what the Uptown Revitalization Strategy questionnaire entailed and stuff. And I think a lot of people thought it was only about 3rd Avenue. And I wonder if maybe the planner or somebody could just very briefly outline the area that is actually covered that we're looking at in this survey, just so that people are clear. And the map, the last map on the last page shows it pretty well, but it's not just about 3rd Avenue. It includes further up to Argyle, I think almost to Roland Arts Center, right down to the Quay.
That's exactly correct. So while we had put out some initial concepts related specifically to 3rd Avenue and what council's hoping to achieve with that specific street redesign, we saw that council has a kind of a broader vision for revitalization for the neighborhood. So we thought from a planning perspective, it's important to ensure that we're continuing to talk with the community, engage them in support of council's vision for revitalizing that district. So that way, when we come to specific action items in the future, we have that sense of buy-in and that we have that sense of understanding of where people want to see us going in support of council's vision. So it is about the broader neighborhood, absolutely.
Thank you for that. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a comment and a question. From the graph, how often do you typically spend time in the Uptown District? From what I took away from that was over 50% of the respondents visit the Uptown District at least once a week or more often. There is a lot of talk and people always say, well, I never go uptown. I never visit uptown. There's nothing up there. So if half of the people in the community are visiting it once a week, people do go uptown. So now we kind of have proof to support what we've always known all along. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And my next question is, can you please tell me what you mean by poverty reduction? A lot of the things you have listed here, I can see falling under this city's mandates, but I'm not sure how poverty reduction would fall under the city's mandate to complete. So can you just talk a little bit more about that, please?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a very excellent question, because you're right. From a municipal perspective, Often local governments don't have a lot of ability to lift people out of poverty or provide the services and resources that a lot of people need. That's often more at a provincial or federal level. But from a municipal perspective, there are things that we can do around housing and zoning, and then specifically looking at partnerships. How can we proactively identify partnerships that help address some of those social needs within the area? So I hope maybe that answers the question a little bit more. It's not necessarily about taking on things outside of our jurisdiction, but finding places where we can be supportive so that economic opportunities that come to the neighborhood advance the revitalization, but also acknowledging that there are social issues that need to be talked about as well to ensure that there's an equitable approach to that, the revitalization of that neighborhood.
Thank you, Caitlin.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil and then Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious, when I look at the results of question 3, what keeps you from visiting the Uptown neighborhood? You could almost lump 50% into the same answer. Like, for example, what is the difference between crime and personal safety? I would almost think that that's the same thing. Seamus, what is the difference?
Yes. So when we designed the survey, we broke that out into two specific like topics around. I mean, for when we came into the responses, what we found was when it came to crime, the crime section was more like perceived, when folks felt that they were seeing things that could continue to be crime. Pardon me. To be considered crime, while on the other hand, the section that says personal safety and security, that's more around when folks responded around that they had personally felt unsafe. So it was personal safety and security is when someone more or less felt they were personally affected by a feeling of a lack of security, while crime was more of a perceived, they weren't experiencing it, but more that was something that was in the back of their mind.
And just to add to Seamus's question or explanation there, that question was, we left it open-ended because we didn't want to pre-assume what people were going to say. We didn't want to necessarily give people specific categories. We wanted to leave it open so that people could share their kind of thoughts openly. And so then Seamus took all of that kind of qualitative data and lumped it into categories. So kind of broader categories based on the types of feedback that we received there.
Well, it's a very informative survey, and I'm really pleasantly surprised of the feedback. 600 responses is excellent. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Solda.
I just wanted to reiterate a bit of what Councillor Haggard was talking about. And the city of Port Alberni isn't qualified or in the business of providing social services. But having said that, we can certainly be a fairly vocal lobby group to expand those services. And I think we can all agree, it's not just our community, but those services need to be expanded in our community. And on the other side, with regards to properties and stuff, we're the watchdogs to make sure the properties are safe and that are housing the at-risk people in our community. It's up to us to kind of watch over that through bylaw and those sorts of things. But I see that as a broad thing. I don't think the city can have the cure to addictions and crime and those sorts of things. But we can certainly be a very vocal lobby group and assure that we have safe buildings and safe streets.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Yeah, 599 people for the survey. It's a good response. But I do have a question regarding the survey. Is this the end of the survey? Because are we going to actually go on the street and talk to some people? Because there's a lot of people that are not on computer. They or don't know about it. And it would be nice to question the people that actually go on the street or go shopping in that area. It's interesting because I hear a lot of people say the only reason they go up in that area other than designated shopping is because of the banks. And it would have been interesting to know what's your main purpose up there? You know, are you going to the bank because the banks are there, or are you actually designated shopping? And with all the bigger box stores, or some of them are closing, the small mom and pops operations would be really valuable in our community, and are valuable in our community, because you get personal shopping basically. So I'm just kind of curious to know if we're going to be doing some street work there.
Thank you. Caitlin, if you want to respond to that. And I just want to say, I think it's a great idea to get a better understanding of exactly what people are coming for. And I know that there's some pieces of that in the survey, but yeah, that would be helpful information to have for sure. Caitlin?
Yeah, absolutely. So our initial plan with the phase 2 of consultation was our assumptions around that were kind of pre-COVID-19. So doing lots of, you know, on the street engagement and kind of being more physically present. Of course, there's kind of currently some restrictions around that. So we're trying to reconceptualize what that process looks like, but it's certainly not outside of the realm of possibilities, but I think we need to just think about the health and safety of people first. But there will definitely be more engagement done, certainly more with the local neighborhood and people who are using that area regularly. So we'll continue to have that discussion and drill down on some of those responses about what brings people to that area or what people are doing in that location. I believe that with regards to personal services, I think 25% of respondents indicated that they come to the area for personal services. So things like banking or like a notary or something like that.
Thank you. Were there any other questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, just a comment. I agree with the other councillors how pleased I am with how the survey went. Way more positive. Way to go, Port Alberni. And second of all, the manager of planning mentioned a $22,000 grant. Can she just sort of, for the folks at home, just sort of elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So the $22,000 grant was an application that we submitted. I believe we came back to you. I believe we came to you back in January, kind of asking for your support in applying for that. So that was with regards specifically to funds to contribute to the kind of the social planning aspects of revitalization, the poverty reduction aspects. So that's what that money is kind of going towards. And then there'll be additional staff time put into more of the economic and business aspects of revitalization for the neighborhood. So because we don't have a social planner in our department, we thought it was really important to get that funding to facilitate those aspects of the discussion with various stakeholders, service providers, local residents.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say, you know, I think a lot of what's in this really supports a lot of the initiatives that are in our strategic plan. And interesting, I don't think anyone is surprised by the key themes and the you know, the priorities that we are all, that no matter what area of the community you live in, the priorities that we agree with are public safety, crime reduction, poverty reduction. So I think that's not surprising, but it's good to have it. And although those are not necessarily, it's good to have it you know, clarified in there. Although it's not necessarily, you know, something that would typically be a municipal responsibility, I think that a lot of what is in our strategic plan, the public safety building obviously being one of the key priorities in our strategic plan, I think this really echoes the need and the support for that type of concept. A lot of crime reduction we don't have direct ability to control, but we do have some things that we can do that are a bit more innovative strategies. You know, rearranging or hiring our new Dave Couson as a manager and restructuring some of the bylaw work and that type of thing. I think that we are making progress on some of these initiatives already. And so I think it's really positive to have these kind of numbers in front of us to be able to see that that really is a priority for the community, no matter where you come from. And I think my last comment is just that often we see crime prevention or poverty reduction as really separate from economic development and economic side of things. I think they are actually very, very closely linked when we talk about, you know, personal safety and people needing to feel safe in the Uptown. there is no better way to make people feel safe than to build a vibrant area with vibrant businesses and spaces where people want to get out of their cars and walk instead of parking right in front of the business that they're going to. I've told this story a couple of times before, but I think it's really relevant to this conversation. When I was the chair of Alberni Community and Women's Services Society, we would have their offices on 3rd Avenue, right in the heart of Uptown, and we would have our meetings at night. And we'd be leaving there around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and it would be dark, and the executive director and myself would always leave last. And so we would kind of look outside before we unlocked the door and make sure that we felt like it was safe to walk out, and then we would both make sure that we both got into our cars safely, and just I think personal safety checks that a lot of the businesses in the area probably do with their staff. And we always felt a little bit uncomfortable leaving in the dark at that time of the evening in the Uptown. And then one night we went to, peek out the door to make sure it was okay to leave the building. And instead of feeling unsafe, we saw people walking by, like 10 people walking by with yoga mats. And Power of Three had just opened and had started running evening classes for yoga. And I've never felt so safe in the Uptown in the evenings as when that happened. And it wasn't, a crime reduction strategy, although I know this is important as well. And this is a part of it. Having this information is the start to being able to make the plan. But it was having people in the area, and it was having a new business move in that was bringing vibrancy to the area. So I think it's important for us to recognize how connected these things are. Improving the area, making it a suitable place for businesses to invest and for people to want to live and be, will improve people's feeling of safety in the area and the actual, crime reduction and everything else. So I'm really happy to see the consensus around these issues, and thanks to Seamus and Caitlin for your work on this. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved.
Thank
Second,
you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And that's, of course, receipt and the next steps. Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And moving on to item 4 from the Acting Director of Engineering, award of tender RFT 009-20 for Bird Street water main upgrades. Mr. Watson, welcome to our Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Minions. It's good to be back.
I will pass it over to you. Thank you.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. This is a request for Council's consideration to provide direction to award a tender for replacement of over a half kilometer of water supply main on Bird Street. That is a link that's been in our planning to do for a number of years, because it is an important supply main from our Bird Street reservoir into the distribution system. But even more importantly, it's imperative that this work be undertaken to provide fire flows that's required for a development that's currently ongoing at on Bird Street, the Port View Apartments, Madam Mayor. So the tender was awarded, or was placed in late May, closed in June, and we had 5 very solid tender results. The lowest bidder being Luco Construction Incorporated at a total price of $622,884. And unfortunately, the tender price, along with what we know will be our engineering costs for total project cost, will be exceeding the amount that was in the 5-year financial plan by an estimated amount of $105,000. So the recommendation for council is to award the tender to the low bidder, and also to approve an increase in the funding available for this project, with the additional $105,000 to be taken from the city's water infrastructure capital reserve fund. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Corbeil first.
Yes, Mr. Watson, where it talks about the estimated expenditures, there's a line item here, engineering oversight, $105,000. What is engineering oversight?
Engineering oversight doesn't, and I thought of that word, actually I was reviewing the report, and the oversight part doesn't allude to any error or omission. It refers more to oversight in terms of overseeing. So this is the amount that we anticipate to pay to the consulting engineer Coors and Associates. The total amount, which includes the designs which are already completed, the tender, the preparation of the tender, and the closing of that tender also completed, as well as the construction supervision and administration of the contract that we will enter into with LUCO, as well as the preparation of the design record drawings at the end of the project that will come back to the city for our records.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Solda.
Just a question for our engineer regarding overruns. Do you foresee anything else coming back to us as an overrun?
Well, anytime you do underground work, there's a potential of finding things that you don't expect. So I can't say that the project will not have any additional costs. However, we don't anticipate any at this time. We think there is an adequate amount built into the tender for unforeseen circumstances. As you'll see in the source of funds, we also have a contribution from the developer of $162,000, which is the calculated amount that the water main needed to be enlarged, the cost of enlarging it to serve the new development. So we think that the amount that we're requesting will be adequate to complete the works.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Solda, would you like to read the motions?
Madam Mayor, I move that the council authorize the staff to amend the city's 5-year financial plan bylaw 2020-2024, bylaw number 5003, for the purpose of increasing the funding available for the Bird Street Anderson to the 17th water main replacement 300-meter capital project for the amount of $105,000, with the funding to be taken from the city's water infrastructure capital reserve fund. Do you want them both read?
I think you can read them together.
Okay, number 2, that the council award the contract to Bird Street Anderson to the 17th water main replacement 300 meters capital project to LUCO Construction Inc. for the tender price of $620,884.66, including taxes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And on to item 5 from the Acting Director of Engineering, award of tender for the Gertrude Street Bridge crossing Roger Creek embankment protection works. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is also a request for council's approval to award a tender, and it's for work associated with embankment protection of the Gertrude Street Bridge, which is the bridge crossing Roger Creek. This is a continuation of bridge improvements that were begun last year. Last year, as you will likely recall, there was considerable work done on the bridge deck, which had some traffic implications. Those works were completed, and this year the second phase of that project is to undertake some work under the bridge with regard to embankment stabilization, some riprap placement, and some timber walls to be constructed under the bridge. The implication on traffic will be much less than it was for the first phase of the work. Funding for this project is coming from the 2019 capital budget, which included a $200,000 amount. A little over $100,000 of that was expended last year, with the remaining being carried over to provide for this work to be done this year. There were 5 tender responses for the work, with the low bidder being Bowerman Excavating Limited at a total cost of $72,423.75. And it's recommended that council provide direction to award the contract for this bridge upgrade work to the low bidder, Bowerman Excavating.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions from council on this one? Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick, just a really easy one. Is this it now? We're done on this bridge once this is done? There's no phase 3 or 4?
Well, we're never done with the structure that, Madam Mayor, that will require additional work. But for now, this is the works that have been that are in the plan. So there is no phase 3 identified, no. But at some point in future, council will be asked for additional funding to work on this bridge.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'm just happy to see that it came in under budget. That'll help.
Always nice to be under budget. And I believe we're under budget on this on phase 1 and phase 2, the project as a whole.
Excellent.
Excellent. Councillor Corbeil.
Just a question about the environmental monitoring. What would that entail? Are we looking, is this something to do with fish habitat or contaminants, or what exactly would that be, Mr. Watson?
That's exactly right. It's with regard to the works being in fish habitat. So we will be retaining a professional RP Bio, which is Dave Clough and Associates, to monitor the in-stream works. There may be some identification of species that might be impacted at the beginning, and then there will be a monitoring of the work as the contractor starts to do the required excavation and placement of material in the in-stream area. So it's critical anytime that you're working in a stream that we make sure we adhere to all of the regulations that are pertaining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council for the city of Port Alberni award the contract for Gertrude Street Bridge Crossing, Roger Creek Embankment Protection Works to Bowerman Excavating Limited for a total cost of $72,423.75, includes GST.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Poon, and seeing no additional questions, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And moving on to item F6 from the City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is being provided for information only at this time in regards to a new ministerial order which was issued at the end of last week on June 17th to provide guidance to local governments on open meetings, electronic meetings, and timing requirements for bylaw passage. This new order, M192, repeals and replaces the previous order, which was M139. The new order requires local governments to undertake best efforts to allow members of the public to attend open meetings in person while still abiding by public health requirements or recommendations under the Public Health Act. Local governments not able to comply with public health orders and hold in-person open meetings will be required to adopt a resolution to provide a rationale for the continued need to meet without the public present. The new guidelines also restrict same-day bylaw adoption, which was permitted in the previous order, with the exception of financial and tax bylaws, which can still be adopted in one meeting. All other bylaws must have at least one day between third reading and adoption. The city has made every effort, and I think has been successful in allowing public participation in meetings via electronic means. Given the new orders, a more detailed report will be provided to the next regular meeting of council, outlining how we intend to move forward with open meetings, which will also require identifying an alternative, larger venue to accommodate in-person attendance. The Clerk's Department will continue to provide information to the public regarding council meetings and participation opportunities throughout the transition back to our former operation practices.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Poon. Thank you very much for that report. It's a time of learning as we go and trying to make things work as best as possible. But it's nice to at least have some updates going, and I'm looking forward to the plans that we're kind of working on to be able to have the public in again. So, okay, so seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And on to correspondence for action. The first item is from the Uptown Merchants Association, a letter dated June 17th, 2020, from Chris Washington, Chair of the Uptown Merchants Association, regarding grant opportunities available for COVID-19 recovery projects. And I think, Tim, is this you or do we have Willa?
Madam Mayor, I can speak to this, and then Director Thorpe can add some detail.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, Madam Mayor and Council, as you'll recall, Council directed that staff facilitate and excuse me, enable as much as possible local businesses to reopen under COVID restrictions. And we've appointed Sean Burgoyne, who's our manager of recreation, to that specific task, and he's doing a great job, I must say. And we've been, Sean and staff in the Economic Development Department have been proactively reaching out to businesses and seeing what they might have, what needs they might have to from the city to support their reopening. We've had a number of requests that we are facilitating. Primarily, it's about the need is about more space to conduct business, and if they need to occupy city sidewalks and streets, we'll enable that through a license to occupy. So we're having some good success in that. We've had a number of businesses at the city-owned Harbor Key who have asked for support. So we've made a couple changes that you've probably seen already, and we've committed to more changes there to support businesses. And a grant opportunity has emerged through
Coastal Economic Trust.
ICE-T, thank you. And ICE-T's offered $15,000, I believe, for just this purpose to support businesses, and it's a quick turnaround grant. So we have prepared an application, have not submitted it yet, but prepared it for the costs that we expect to incur at Harbor Key. Having said that, we now have a letter from the Uptown merchants. We haven't had a lot of requests from merchants in that area to date before this letter, but now we have this letter, and we will be engaging with the Uptown merchants and the individual merchants to see what kind of measures we can put in place that will support them. If council wants us to divert the grant application to a Third Avenue project, we will certainly do that. Or if you want us to continue with the grant application for the Harbor Key costs and at the same time undertake some work at Third Avenue, we'll do that. So I think based on council's previous direction, we're going to support all businesses everywhere in the city, and in both Harbor Key and the Uptown, we'll support businesses where we can. And there will be some costs in that, and those will be brought back to council for your consideration. I would suggest that the question before you right now, one of the questions is, how do you want to proceed with this grant application?
Can you clarify how much costs have been incurred at the Harbor Key to date?
Sure, I'm going to ask Director Thorpe to tell you the details of what we've activated there and what we've committed to do as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So at this stage, we've enabled a variety of outdoor seating in front of Harbor Key restaurants. So what that means is we've shifted some parking stalls and blocked those off with concrete barricades. And we've also installed 2 additional common covered eating areas. So essentially there's 3 separate covered eating areas at Harbor Key, and to enable families to go and enjoy the restaurants down there, the sites down there, while restricting clustering as much as we can. And we're also, as part of the grant application, indicating that we'd like to install some water bottle filling stations as well as additional receptacles for garbage and recycling. So at this stage, we're using 2 of the marquee tents that we would normally earmark for other events and projects. So the goal would be that's an investment we've made currently. We'd like to look to shift those tents to other projects if we're able to move forward with submitting this grant application.
Councillor Poon.
Yes, I'm just wondering, is there a dollar figure associated with the costs at Harbor Key?
Yes, so we can, staff would be happy to step away and get a delineated list, if you like, of all the costs to date, as well as the grant moving forward.
How much does the grant will cover?
As $15,000 up to 50% support with the grant. And the other 50% funding would actually have to be cash provided as opposed to in-kind.
Thank you. And so I'm just curious, we haven't, like you're asking basically if we want to include the Third Avenue area, but I don't think we have an answer yet on, do we have room in what we've already done in the grant application to do other areas as well? I think that's what we're trying to understand. So are we anticipating having spent $30,000, or are we looking to apply for a smaller amount at the Harbor Key?
So, Madam Mayor, I'm unsure. I was just reviewing the ICE-T website, and I'm unsure if we're able to capture both spaces within the same grant application, or if it needs to be. So, if we can say Port Alberni as a whole, and we'd like to look at offering opportunities for both spaces, or if we're looking at implementing two separate grants.
Okay, so I believe we are able to say Port Alberni as a whole. This is the general initiative. And just because I was in an ICE-T meeting very recently where we were talking about some specific examples of how communities were using this grant funding. So I think I understand now. So my preference is that we don't look to just support businesses at the Harbor Key, but we look to try to support businesses in the entire Alberni or city of Port Alberni, Alberni Valley, but most of the businesses are in the city of Port Alberni with this type of project. So if businesses in the Uptown want this type of initiative, we should be including that in the grant. If businesses on Johnston Road want this type of initiative, it's a bit more complicated there, obviously, but we should be looking to include that as well. Redford anywhere. So if we are able to apply for just a general community initiative, which I believe we are, then I would like to see us apply for as much as possible. I know Ladysmith was referenced in this letter, and the initiative happening in Ladysmith is really impressive, just how they have used this to create little seating nooks all throughout their community, and at the same time add some really attractive lighting that will be there year round, and just really makes people want to enjoy these spaces. So I think that's a great model to work from, and certainly I think has caught the attention of a lot of people in our community.
So Madam Mayor, just to confirm, if that's the direction council wishes to go, I'm confident that we could, staff in that application could support more than just the Harbor Key in that application.
Thank you. That's great for clarifying. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
Madam Mayor, I would agree with you. I think it should be for the whole of Port Alberni. I also look at when you talk about seating nooks and stuff, there's your little pocket parks, right? That could be all year round. And we have areas in our community that could do that. And if we're talking about that, we have to have, if they only do 50% and we have to have 50%, we still have a strategic fund that came out of, I don't know if that's the exact terminology for that fund for the COVID recovery, but that we could take some money out of that. We haven't discussed how that picture is going to look for COVID recovery, but there could be a matching fund from that particular fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Poon.
That was going to be my suggestion as well. During budget time, we did put away money for COVID-19 economic projects, I believe. And so if we need additional funding, I think we can take it out of that money, because I fully agree. We need to support all the businesses in our community. They all need a lot of help right now. And I just want to make a comment to Ms. Washington's letter. We were all heartbroken that our 3rd Avenue project was a COVID casualty. Nobody was more heartbroken than me, that's for sure. And I do have plans on visiting Ladysmith, and hopefully the mayor will be able to come with me to see firsthand what they have done and what we can utilize on 3rd Avenue. I think there's lots of projects that we can do that will have an immediate impacts on 3rd Avenue without tearing up sidewalks and streets, and not for a lot of people. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Actually, I did have the opportunity to visit Ladysmith last week, and I spoke with the mayor there, and he had mentioned a budget of about 35,000 was approved, and what they did was they asked local businesses to chip in on the patio sets and things like that, and they received a donation for lighting as well. So I wonder if this is a partnership. There's a possibility to partner with our local businesses, those who are doing okay and still want to help out. We can perhaps partner with them to fund these patio sets and things like that.
Thank you. Yes, and Ladysmith had several donations, and I think there's some similarities here. And we know that our Uptown merchants fundraise some money, for instance, for lighting up the trees. And so there's, some we may be able to seek, more support from businesses. Certainly, there might be opportunity, but there's also some, funding we might be able to draw from for some of the matching funds already as it is, or, topping up the matching fund, that kind of thing. But Ladysmith is a great example. Obviously, their First Avenue is a great street to visit all the time. And they've definitely been really looking to make some proactive improvements still throughout COVID that are just more specific to the types of initiatives that we're seeing really around the world as beneficial as we move through COVID. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Love everything that's been said right now. And is there any way we could maybe, like it suggested, take a ride to Ladysmith and find out how the heck they did it?
Well, I think we know how they did it, but I think that it's always worthwhile to go and visit other communities and look at some of the specific things that are working and some that aren't. And while I'm sure we've all been through Ladysmith many times, it's sometimes nice to just get out and with a couple of people walk through any community and take a fresh look at really some of the specifics. So Councillor Haggard and I are going, and Councillor Washington, you're welcome to join us. Any other comments from council? Councillor Paulson.
I would just once again like to suggest that the Uptown Merchants Association has initiated this letter with us, and I would like to see our economic development department or other staff actually meet with them and develop a priority list of things. They used a bit of a shotgun method in their letter, but I think they need to do some costing and help them out with their grant app and move forward with this. I think it's a great idea. So keep moving.
Thank you. And just for clarity, this would be our grant application, not the Uptown Merchants grant application, but absolutely. So I will move that we receive the letter and direct staff to include the Uptown shopping district as well as any other interested shopping districts in the grant application. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor. Any opposed? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. There are, and thank you, Willa. There are no proclamations, no correspondence for information. Report from in camera. So we have a report dated June 15th, 2020 from the Deputy City Clerk providing information on a property exchange between the city and D.W. Johnson Holdings Limited. Twyla or Davina, would you like to just give a summary of this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to share the screen because it'll give a good snapshot of the properties that we're talking about. So the city owns lots 19, 20, 21, and 23 along Alexander Road. D.W. Johnson Holdings is the owner of lot 22. The owner, D.W. Johnson Holdings, requested that the city consider an exchange of lots. In this case, the city owned lot 19 for lot 22. Council supported the exchange, subject to the owner being responsible for all costs. The owner has met those obligations, and now council, this information is just being shared as the city will now proceed with giving notice as per the legislative requirements.
Thank you very much. Any comments from council on this? Okay, and so it's just for information, so it doesn't need to be received. Moving on to council reports. We have a couple of council reports in the agenda. Any items people would like to highlight or ask questions on? Okay, seeing none, I will move receipt of council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to city business be received. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. And seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Is there any new business to bring forward? Okay. Oh, Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick question. For our sidewalks, I know there's people walk or staff walk the sidewalks, but we've had some issues on our sidewalks, and Councillor Corbell and I heard someone mention sidewalks that there's some repairs badly needed on them. So how do we do that? Do we do it case by case, or is there a pattern?
So I would, I'll get the CAO to comment on this. I would imagine that we need to, if people have concerns, we would encourage them to bring them forward to our staff, so that staff can make sure that we know about the concerns, at least to start. Tim?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. If we are made aware of an issue or a concern with the sidewalk, we'll investigate and take action if required or if deemed necessary. We also have a proactive program where we inspect sidewalks and prioritize the work. If council would like, we can bring a report to a future meeting outlining our program.
I think, Madam Mayor, it would be great for the public to hear how we do it, and if they have concerns, they can bring it forward, because I know they've brought it forward to us. So I'm just think the public should hear it too.
Okay, would you like to make a motion to have a report on that brought forward?
I will move that staff make a report for council regarding how we look at our sidewalks and how we maintain them, and the scheduling, how it works.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Corbeil, did you have another comment?
Well, I just wanted to say several months ago, someone came to me who had tripped on a sidewalk on Gertrude Street, and I did talk to the city engineer. But yeah, I think further to what Councillor Sold is talking about, I just wonder if there isn't almost a scorecard of what shape our sidewalks are in, because there are some areas that are not very good, and the chances of a tripping hazard are quite high. So I definitely think it'd be interesting to hear how this is taken care of. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I know that staff does have a process that they use around this, and it doesn't get brought to council because it is it's not something that requires council approval. It's just a staff process. But I think sometimes the issue is that we're not aware of concerns. People don't always bring them forward to the city. So when that happens, then unfortunately things can get missed. So we definitely do encourage people to connect with city staff if there is a safety concern in their area. So for now, the motion on the floor is for staff to bring forward just a basic informational report on the process that we use, if there's a timeline and schedule and process we use to identify priorities for sidewalk repair and maintenance. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any other items for people to bring forward to new business? Seeing none. Question period. City Clerk, did we have any questions submitted?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Then adjournment. Would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and we will see you at our next meeting.